We are following breaking news on the largest fentanyl bust in U.S. history. Officials have seized 3 million pills in a massive operation.
This morning, federal prosecutors announced what they are calling the most sophisticated political infiltration operation ever uncovered on American soil. Over 2.3 million fentanyl pills seized, $47 million in cash recovered, 18 metric tons of narcotics intercepted. And at the center of it all, investigators alleged they discovered something far worse than drugs. They found a shadow government, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota, a metropolitan area of 3.7 million people, gleaming skyline, world-class universities, Fortune 500 headquarters. But according to federal affidavits filed this week, beneath that polished surface, authorities believed they had uncovered a transnational fentanyl trafficking cartel that had systematically corrupted law enforcement, city leadership, and, investigators would later allege, reached all the way to the governor's office. The operation had a code name, Project North Star, and what federal agents discovered inside encrypted servers seized during coordinated raids would, according to sources familiar with the investigation, rewrite everything the public thought they knew about Minnesota politics. If you think corruption is just about taking bribes, you are not ready for what comes next. 4:18 a.m. Cedar Riverside neighborhood, Minneapolis. The streets are silent. Fog rolls in off the Mississippi River, clinging to empty sidewalks. Neon signs flicker above shuttered halal markets and late-night cafes. The only sound is the distant hum of refrigerated trucks idling near warehouse loading docks. Then the darkness explodes. Flashbangs detonate simultaneously across 7 locations. FBI hostage rescue teams in black tactical gear pour through reinforced doorways. DIA strike units breach side entrances with battering rams. ICE Homeland Security Investigations agents cut through chain-link fences behind suspected stash houses. SWAT teams from Minneapolis and St. Paul move in coordinated waves, their laser sights cutting red lines through the pre-dawn smoke. This is not a single raid. This is a simultaneous federal takedown operation spanning 12 city blocks. At a 3-story apartment complex on Cedar Avenue, agents smash through a steel reinforced door and find what investigators later described as a fentanyl pill production facility disguised as a community center. Pill presses stamped with cartel insignias, industrial mixers, 50-gallon drums of fentanyl, precursor chemicals shipped according to shipping manifests recovered at the scene, from suppliers in China and routed through Canadian border crossings. 2 suspects try to run. They make it 6 feet. Agents tackle them into snowbanks. Duffel bags spill open. Bundles of cash scatter across frozen concrete. One bag contains over $400,000 in vacuum-sealed stacks. Another contains 2 kilograms of pure fentanyl powder, enough, federal prosecutors would later note, to kill over 1 million people. 3 blocks away, a DIA tactical unit breaches what appears to be a shuttered restaurant on Riverside Avenue. Inside, they find a narcotics distribution hub. Wall-to-wall shelving stacked with shrink-wrapped packages. Investigators would later estimate the haul at over 800 kilograms of methamphetamine, 300 kilograms of cocaine, and 1.4 million fentanyl pills. At a luxury townhouse in the North Loop District, FBI agents execute a no-knock warrant and discover something that freezes everyone in place. A secure server room. Floor-to-ceiling hard drives. Encrypted communication terminals. Digital ledgers displayed on monitors showing real-time financial transfers moving through shell companies registered in Delaware, Wyoming, and the Cayman Islands. And sitting on a desk, investigators later reported finding a handwritten note with a single line. "Keep the corridors open. North Star depends on it." Signed with initials that would later appear, according to forensic analysis, to match a high-ranking state official. 7:52 a.m., FBI Minneapolis Field Office, Brooklyn Center. Cyber forensic analysts huddle around monitors in a secure operations room. They have been working through the night, cracking military-grade encryption on servers seized during the raids. What they uncover, according to sources familiar with the investigation, is a network so vast and so methodically constructed that seasoned agents struggle to believe what they are seeing. Project North Star, a master operations plan that investigators later alleged revealed a years-long effort to transform Minneapolis, St. Paul into a primary fentanyl distribution corridor for a transnational trafficking cartel. The digital files appeared to show shell companies with names like Twin Cities Logistics Solutions, Northland Freight Consulting, and Great Lakes Distribution Group. Investigators discovered what seemed to be falsified trucking contracts, altered shipping manifests, and financial transfers disguised as payments for consulting services and agricultural supply contracts. Money flowed, according to recovered transaction logs, from cartel-controlled accounts in Mexico through offshore banking networks in Panama, then into U.S.-based LLCs that appeared legitimate on paper. From there, funds were allegedly laundered through car washes, used car dealerships, real estate holdings, and, most disturbingly, political action committees and nonprofit foundations. But it was the authorization codes that stopped investigators cold. Embedded in the encrypted files, forensic analysts reportedly found digital signatures linked to high-level government email accounts. Timestamps that corresponded with border security policy shifts. Approval codes that appeared to authorize altered patrol schedules along northern smuggling routes. And at the center of it all, investigators later alleged, was a state governor, codenamed Architect in the cartel's internal communications, who they believed had systematically used executive authority to create protective infrastructure for the fentanyl network. This is not corruption. This is command-level collusion. According to the evidence authorities claim to have uncovered, the governor's office had allegedly issued grants to nonprofit organizations that investigators suspected were cartel fronts, executive orders that reduced law enforcement oversight in key neighborhoods, appointment recommendations for judges and police leadership positions that seemed designed, investigators believed, to install personnel sympathetic to cartel interests. One encrypted message recovered from the server reportedly read, "Architect confirms green light. All enforcement stand-down protocols active. Convoys proceed as scheduled." The internet exploded within hours. Online communities began dissecting every policy decision, every appointment, every budget allocation made over the previous 3 years. Social media discussions intensified as users cross-referenced shipping data, city council votes, and federal border crossing logs. Unverified reports spread rapidly across encrypted forums, with some claiming the operation extended into neighboring states. Many people online began questioning how long this network had existed. And investigators, according to sources close to the case, had the same question. Because what they were looking at was not the work of months. It was the architecture of years. 6:11 a.m., Federal Coordination Center, Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport. A massive digital map dominates the operations wall. Dozens of red markers pulse across the Twin Cities metro area and beyond, extending north toward Duluth, west into rural Minnesota, and south along Interstate 35 corridors toward Iowa. Each marker represents a suspected cartel node. Stash houses, distribution hubs, transit safe houses, human trafficking way stations, migrant smuggling coordination points. And every single one, investigators believed, was protected by a network of corrupted officials and compromised law enforcement. The mission briefing is short. This is a full-spectrum eradication operation. We are dismantling the entire infrastructure. No exceptions. Over 1,200 federal agents. 64 SWAT teams. Black Hawk helicopters positioned at staging areas across the metro. ICE tactical units coordinating with Border Patrol for potential northern border interdictions. U.S. Marshal Service fugitive task forces on standby. FBI evidence response teams prepped for large-scale forensic recovery. This is the largest coordinated federal law enforcement operation in Minnesota history. At 6:45 a.m., the assault begins. In the Midway district of St. Paul, DEA agents storm a warehouse complex disguised as an import-export facility. Inside, they find a fentanyl super lab with industrial-scale production capability. Pill presses capable of producing 200,000 pills per day, barrels of precursor chemicals, vacuum sealers, packaging equipment. Investigators later estimated the lab's potential output at over 10 million fentanyl pills per month. 3 suspects are arrested trying to destroy hard drives. They fail. In the suburb of Bloomington, FBI teams breach a sprawling residential compound protected by high walls and electronic surveillance. Authorities later described it as a cartel fortress stocked with military-grade weapons, encrypted communication systems, and over $6 million in cash hidden inside false walls and floor compartments. In South Minneapolis, ICE Homeland Security Investigations agents dismantle a human trafficking transit house where investigators believed smuggled migrants were held before being transported to other parts of the country. Evidence recovered at the scene suggested the cartel used migrant smuggling routes as cover for fentanyl distribution operations, embedding drugs within groups of vulnerable people who had no idea they were being used as mules. Near the Canadian border, federal agents intercept a convoy of refrigerated trucks carrying what shipping manifests listed as frozen food products. Inside insulated compartments, investigators reportedly discovered over 4 metric tons of methamphetamine and cocaine hidden beneath layers of commercial seafood. The drivers cooperate immediately. They provide routes, schedules, and, most critically, the names of law enforcement officers who, they alleged, had been paid to look the other way during weigh station inspections. By noon, the haul is staggering. Over 2.3 million fentanyl pills, 860 kilograms of methamphetamine, 340 kilograms of cocaine, 120 kilograms of heroin, $47 million in cash, 16 luxury vehicles, 42 firearms including fully automatic rifles, and 173 arrests spanning cartel operatives, money launderers. And, according to federal indictments unsealed that afternoon, 12 current or former law enforcement officials. The underworld took more damage in 6 hours than it had in the last 6 years. 2:34 p.m. FBI Cyber Forensics Lab, Brooklyn Center. Investigators are examining internal emails and server logs recovered from the raids. What they uncover, according to sources familiar with the case, is a betrayal so deep it shakes even the most hardened agents. The cartel had not just bribed law enforcement, it had rebuilt it. Digital records appeared to show monthly payments ranging from $5,000 to $50,000 made to patrol officers, detectives, border agents, and command-level personnel. The payments were disguised as consulting fees, real estate commissions, and investment returns. In exchange, according to evidence authorities claimed to recover, these officials allegedly provided convoy schedules, surveillance blackout windows, advance notice of federal investigations, and falsified incident reports to cover cartel activity. One email chain recovered from a deputy chief's seized laptop reportedly included detailed raid schedules for DEA operations sent 3 days before the raids were supposed to happen. Another set of internal memos appeared to show how patrol grids were systematically altered to create enforcement-free corridors along key trafficking routes through Minneapolis and St. Paul. Officers were reassigned, surveillance cameras were repositioned, weigh stations along Interstate 35 were shut down for maintenance on nights when cartel convoys were scheduled to pass through. Investigators later alleged they found evidence suggesting some judges had accepted payments to reduce sentences for cartel-connected defendants or dismiss cases on procedural grounds. One federal agent, according to reports from inside the investigation, said it felt like discovering a second police force, one that answered not to the public, but to the cartel. Honest officers felt betrayed. Some wept when shown the evidence. Others demanded immediate arrests. And arrests came swiftly. Federal agents stormed precinct offices and took senior sergeants into custody in front of their colleagues. A deputy police chief was arrested at his home in front of news cameras. A Border Patrol supervisor was detained at a checkpoint he had been assigned to protect. The internet reacted explosively. Online communities began analyzing years of arrest data, conviction rates, and sentencing patterns. Social media users posted maps showing how enforcement activity had mysteriously decreased in specific neighborhoods over the past 3 years. Internet discussions questioned whether the corruption extended into the state legislature, the judiciary, and even federal agencies. Public speculation grew as more details emerged. And investigators, according to sources close to the case, knew the public was right to be suspicious. Because the system had not just been infiltrated, it had been redesigned. Federal investigators later alleged that the scope of Project North Star extended far beyond Minnesota. Forensic analysis of seized financial records appeared to show the network operated distribution hubs in Wisconsin, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Illinois. Fentanyl and methamphetamine produced or stored in Minneapolis, St. Paul were allegedly moved south along Interstate 35 through Des Moines and Kansas City, then distributed across the Midwest and beyond. Trucking contractors with no prior criminal records were allegedly recruited to transport narcotics hidden inside shipments of agricultural products, construction materials, and renewable energy equipment. Shipping manifests were altered at cartel-controlled logistics firms. Way station bypasses were coordinated through compromised transportation officials. Investigators estimated, according to documents filed in federal court, that the network moved between 8 and 12 metric tons of narcotics per month through Minnesota corridors, generating an estimated $400 million annually. But it was a single encrypted file recovered during a forensic deep dive into the governor's alleged digital communications that revealed the true scale of the operation. The file was titled Phase 3 Permanent Integration. According to investigators who later described its contents, the document appeared to outline a long-term strategy to transform Minnesota into what the cartel referred to as a northern anchor state, a secure operational zone with compromised law enforcement, cooperative political leadership, and infrastructure designed to facilitate uninterrupted narcotics trafficking for decades. The plan allegedly included expanded political donations to campaigns at the state and local level, ensuring cartel-friendly candidates held key positions in government, creation of nonprofit organizations and community foundations to provide legal cover for money laundering, and to build public goodwill that would discourage federal scrutiny. Recruitment of additional law enforcement personnel through financial incentives and targeted blackmail operations. Strategic use of immigration and border policy advocacy to reduce enforcement along northern smuggling corridors. And, most chillingly, according to sources familiar with the investigation, the establishment of a shadow governance structure, a parallel system that could direct policy, influence judicial outcomes, and neutralize threats without ever appearing on any official organizational chart. Investigators later alleged the governor, codenamed Architect, was intended to serve as the political shield for this system, using executive authority and public trust to protect cartel operations under the cover of progressive policy initiatives. The internet quickly reacted to the revelations. Online investigators claimed the network extended deeper than anyone had imagined. Unverified reports suggested the cartel had cultivated relationships with federal officials, port authorities, and even elements within immigration enforcement agencies. Social media discussions intensified as users connected the dots between policy shifts, budget allocations, and cartel expansion timelines. Many online observers believed this was only the surface, and federal investigators, according to court filings, seemed to agree. Because what they had uncovered was not just a drug trafficking operation, it was a blueprint for the systematic capture of democratic institutions. Power does not always announce itself with violence. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as progress, as compassion, as policy reform. It hides behind nonprofit foundations and community outreach programs. It flows through political action committees and campaign donations. It wears a badge, sits on a bench, signs executive orders, and by the time you realize what has happened, the system is no longer yours. According to the Centers for Disease Control, over 107,000 Americans died from drug overdoses in the most recent reporting year. Fentanyl is the leading cause. 2 milligrams, a few grains of salt, is enough to kill. The 2.3 million fentanyl pills seized in this operation, investigators noted, could have resulted in over 1 million deaths. But the pills are just the symptom. The real poison is the corruption that allows them to flood our streets unchecked. The betrayal by officials who swore an oath to protect and serve, but chose profit over principle. The exploitation of vulnerable migrants who were used as human shields for cartel logistics. The dismantling of trust in the very institutions democracy depends on. Across this country, federal investigators are fighting every day to dismantle networks like the one described here. They are working against transnational cartels that have grown more sophisticated, more embedded, and more willing to corrupt the systems meant to stop them. And they need you to pay attention. If you are still watching, tap like so more people see this story. Share it with someone who needs to understand how deep organized crime infiltration can go. Comment expose if you believe corruption at any level must be dragged into the light, no matter how powerful the people involved. Because silence is not neutrality. The question is not whether infiltration like this could happen. The question is whether we will recognize it before it is too late. Stay vigilant. Stay informed, and never assume the system is too strong to be compromised. Because power, when left unchecked, does not need force. It only needs silence and ambition.